The question was asked, what is divine alchemy? The question is now asked, where and what is the seat of divine alchemy? We know that to become a divine scientist, that our inquiries and explorations into the nitty-gritty of life, the cause and effect, action and reaction, takes place in our mind. And as a divine physicist, we recognize that the place where the feelings and experiences of the emotions of life take place in the heart. But what about divine alchemy? Let's see if we can extract the essence of two stories and allow them to mix together in an alchemical way to perhaps give us a chance to answer this question. You'll no doubt remember that story about the man who decided that he wanted to become rich by turning base metal into gold. So he went out and bought all the alchemical texts that he could find. He bought himself a cauldron and put it in his basement. And he spent all the time that he possibly could down there, putting essences into his cauldron and stirring them around, in between examining the ancient scripts. But then it so happened that he had a wife who was somewhat of a shrew, prone to fits of anger and so forth. So one day, while the man was down in his basement stirring his cauldron, his wife came to the top of the stairs with the baby and said, "I have to go off to the market, you'll have to look after the baby." So being a dutiful wife, he went up and collected the child, put it on his hip and took it down the stairs and continued to stir his pot. But he saw a bubble on the other side of his pot, and he leant over to stir the bubble into the mix, when lo and behold, the baby fell into the cauldron. Wow. So he fishes out the baby. It's pure gold. He's ecstatic. He puts it on a shelf and he thinks, I'm going to be rich. This is what, but my God, what am I going to tell my wife? But just then there was a terrible kerfuffle going on, and the next door's dog was chasing their cat, and the cat came flying down the stairs with the dog following, and they both fell in the cauldron. So he fishes them out, pure gold. So he puts them on the shelf. Oh my God, he's rich beyond measure now. But then his wife comes home. She stands on the top of the stairs and says, "You can bring the baby up now. I'm back. It's time for his feed." "Oh, darling, would you mind coming down here? I have something to tell you." Well, she put on a temper tantrum, stamped her feet, slept on the top step, and went sliding down straight into the cauldron. Oh, my goodness. So, of course, she was very heavy. So he had to tie a rope around her leg and start hauling her out. Oh boy, was she heavy. So he slipped and fell in himself. Pure gold. But then the neighbors noticed that there was nothing happening in the house. So they reported it to the authorities, who went and told the king, and he sent someone to the house to check it out, and they found all these gold statues. So he had them put on a cart and brought back to the palace, but the king had more than enough gold in his coffers. So he had all the gold melted down, made into coins, which he distributed amongst the people of the town. Then there's a story about the great King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Now we know that both of them are right up there insofar as history is concerned, famous for their various qualities. The Queen of Sheba for her beauty and her riches, and King Solomon because he was able to communicate with the birds, he knew magic, he had power over the winds and so forth and so on. But you know, there was a time when the Queen of Sheba wanted to check out King Solomon. You know, was he really what he was told to be? So she went with her entourage to make a visit to King Solomon, taking great wealth, camels filled with treasures and wonderful gifts for King Solomon. Well, in the meantime, King Solomon had had his palace polished to the nth degree so that it was, you know, worthy of welcoming this great queen. Well, when the Queen of Sheba presented herself to King Solomon was quite overwhelmed, not only by her physical beauty, but the riches that she had brought to him. But in giving him obeisance, she said to him, well, I know that you are renowned for your abilities, your powers of communication, and your ways with the things of nature. So you wouldn't mind if I give you 3 riddles? No, by all means, go ahead, said King Solomon. So the Queen of Sheba said, the first riddle is, what is it that in the fields bends over its head and is lauded by the rich but not liked by the poor, that the birds love but the fishes hate? And King Solomon said, well, that would be flax, because flaxseed is made into the linen that the rich people wear. It is also the common garment, the rough garment of the ordinary people. It's made into shrouds. The birds love its seeds and the fishes hate it because it's made into the nets which catch them. Yes, said the Queen of Sheba, you're very right. You've answered the first riddle. And the second riddle is, what is it that flows as fluid, that does not come from the heavens and does not come from a wellspring, but can taste like honey or the bitterest aloe? King Solomon said, well, that would be tears that flow from the eyes of man, because the tears that flow can have the sweetness of honey or the bitterness of sadness. Yes, said the Queen of Sheba, you have answered the second riddle. But then she said, there is a third riddle. And she clapped her hands, and in came 2 servants carrying 2 vases of flowers. One was made by man. Her artisans had formed the exquisite natural flowers which totally mirrored the real flowers in the second vase. So she said to King Solomon, which is the vase of real flowers? King Solomon examined those vases, scrutinized them in the deepest possible way. And then he thought he had it, because there was a dewdrop. Yes, but then he saw that an identical dewdrop was on the other flowers. So he continued silently while all those present fell into a deep state of anticipation. Just then, a bee flew in through the window, and a servant quickly got up to chase it out, and King Solomon said, "No." And he waited, and sure enough, the bee, following its nature, went straight to a rose in the vase of real flowers. King Solomon pointed to that vase, and of course, Queen of Sheba acknowledged and recognized that indeed King Solomon was wise, with a wisdom that did not come from those of ordinary life. What is the essence of these two stories? What is it that you can extract from this first story? What's the catch sentence in this first story? And what is it that is the crux of this story of King Solomon and Queen of Sheba? That when we put them together, we know the answer to what and where resides divine alchemy for us. What is it in this first story that reveals its essence to us?
I think that the first story is to do with the greed of the man. He's trying to make more money by alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
And the second story is that about awareness of King Solomon
Uh-huh.
of flowers.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're getting close to recognition. So maybe we let these two chemistries do their work for us.
It's interesting, the first story, when he puts all this labour into it. I mean, if he put that labour into something else, he could have made it a very good one.
Yes, indeed.
And in the end, all of that labour went to everybody, and I like that.
Exactly. So here's another clue, isn't it?
I think the outcome of both of them too was kind of determined by where the man was in his heart.
Right.
That's kind of all about whatever he was about, and he ended up being made into coins, and Solomon was just about being him.
Absolutely.
I think that's
Yes.
So the illusion of the prince, the first one was not to do with this illusion. Oh, I'm going to be rich.
Yes.
Not going to be rich at all. Everybody felt it was like an illusion to him. But in the other one, it was like, this is the truth.
Yes.